so
All
sorry.
right. Speaking of the Dems and homophobia, here it is. My appearance on Pod Save America. I can't believe they posted this in full, by the way. That's crazy.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Lovett, and guest hosting with me today is the massively popular streamer Leftist Dumbass himself. You just self-described.
That's okay, sure, fair. I say himbo, but damn.
Okay. Hassan Piker, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
After my conversation with...
Whoa, you're being...
No, I saw the
you
ankles.
clocked him. You clocked him immediately.
Hassan, you'll hear my conversation with Seth Moulton. We talked about the Democratic Party. We talked about the controversy over his comments around trans athletes.
Nothing wrong with being
also
gay.
on the feed right
Okay.
now, you can
Just
hear
wanna be-
Dan's conversation with Jen O'Malley Dillon, Quentin Folks, David Plouffe, and Stephanie Cutter about what went wrong in the Harris campaign. We're having a bunch of conversations about what we learned from the election, where we go from here, with a bunch of different voices, one of which is here today. People are mad that we talked to the Harris campaign. People are mad we're talking to you. People are mad, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But let's start with this.
It was Big Tent.
It's a big
Big
tent.
tent.
It's a big tent. All right.
Dick
No,
Cheney
I was
in it.
drinking coffee,
It's got Dick Cheney in
dummies.
it. It's got Hassan Piker in it.
Yeah.
It's got Dan Osborne in it. It's
I-
got Seth Moulton in it.
Yeah. You know, Tent shouldn't maybe feature Dick Cheney in it, but everybody else I can have a conversation with.
Great. All right. Now, look, the main pastime on the left, other than being mad for the last few weeks, is everyone saying how right they were all along about Democrats being out of touch and bound to lose.
We don't have subtitles readily
Welcome to
available
Pod Save America.
yet.
I'm
Oh,
John
wait,
Lovett, and
it
guest
is.
hosting with me.
Okay, never mind. I was wrong.
I think like the bit of it is
Rogan because of.
I think a month before
All right. Now, look,
your Dick Cheney.
pastime on the left, other than being mad for the last few weeks, is everyone saying how right they were all along about Democrats being out of touch and bound to lose.
Arrest me. Sorry. So I sat at this chair. Well, maybe not at this chair, but I had the offline interview with John. I think a month before the election, and a lot of the concerns that I
laughing
brought
at?
up to him, it seemingly came across as somewhat prescient, where people went back to the footage, and I've been seeing comments that were rather positive about okay, he said a lot of stuff there that was objectively correct, seeming.
Yeah, I want to talk about one aspect of that, which is that you were saying, others were saying that, hey, like Trump going on Rogan, Trump going on Theo Von, like something is happening here, and we need to understand it. We need to address it. It's real. And I remember like my experience, it's like seared in my mind of Trump being on Joe Rogan because of how, like my path of understanding it, because what I saw first were a bunch of people taking clips and saying, wow, Rogan really didn't like Trump. Trump is a mess on this show. He comes across terribly. Rogan was like kind of giving Trump space to hang himself rhetorically. And then I watch it, I'm like, Trump did fucking great in this interview.
Yeah, he's very telegenic. That's the thing that like a lot of people, I guess, refuse to factor in for some weird reason is that, yeah, he definitely rambles on. He likes to call it the weave. And even Joe Rogan made fun of him for that a little bit in the process. But like, there is something to be said about a relatively telegenic person who is able to portray himself as, I like to call it honestly dishonest, where like everybody knows he's a bit of a scumbag, but he's your scumbag. And he's able to get that across to a lot of people. And I don't think that there is really anyone with that level of television presence on the Democratic Party front. I think like the most skilled orator in the Democratic Party's ranks in the last couple of decades was obviously Barack Obama. And outside of that, I think like in a lot of instances, purely from optics point of view, Democrats track is like technocratic, elitist, too serious about everything that they talk about. And
Are you
there's
bored of
certainly
this?
a lot of that on the Republican Party side as well.
I'm just asking.
And we've seen failed initiatives
Are you bored
from
of it?
establishment Republicans that tried
I'd
to
love to
recreate
hear
the
myself.
Trump phenomenon with the likes of Ron DeSantis, and that was a massive failure. But ultimately, I think this goes beyond podcasts. This is something that I've been talking about quite frequently. I know the podcast thing is like the most, like that's the one that got everyone's attention. But I said this on CNN last night that you can't really podcast your way out of this problem. Like having, there was that one tweet saying like, oh, we just have 100 Pod Save Americas, but they all have to look like Hassan. Like that's not how this works.
Oh, you think that one tweet might have been wrong? But the yeah, like I guess so. I agree with that. It became this couple kind of like, I don't know, like
Why are we wearing the same shirt? I don't know, dumbass. Think about it. Maybe it's because I filmed this fucking morning before I started the stream. Stop asking stupid questions, Chad. Jesus Christ.
devastating loss to Trump, and everybody's looking for these sort of little explanations that all feel like they just feel silly. Like, oh, we need a Joe Rogan of the left, and even saying like I don't even want to talk about how stupid that is anymore because even that has become stupid. But I do agree that like people are like, oh well, she should have gone on Rogan. All right, yeah, sure, I think so too.
That would not have changed the outcome of this election.
There's a larger problem to what you're getting at, which is like, why don't we have figures and where like we think they would do great on that show, and why is someone like Joe Rogan now, who was 4 years ago open to Bernie, now suddenly open to Trump? Like that's the deeper problem. Like you look at like successful Democratic messengers or progressive messengers over the last like decades, and you think, all right, well, Bill Clinton obviously was successful and he like ran against the Democratic Party in some way. Barack Obama did the same thing. Bernie does the same thing. AOC does the same thing. I'm not talking about on policy.
You don't mean it like also in the same direction of running against?
No, but running against the establishment in some way. And just saying, and the reason I connect them is because they all did something which is demonstrated that they were not part of the Democratic establishment, both like on policy and rhetorically, right? Like
Tim Pool's hairline. Thank you for the 25. Get this up.
That's what they all
Level
did.
2 hype train.
And I'm just wondering, like, what, like, the one place where like, I know you like find, you know, there's a place where there's like kind of an alignment of like the Seth Moulton critique of the Democratic Party and the lefty critique of the Democratic Party, which is just like, it's fucking annoying and like kind of, I don't know, like pedantic in some way.
It's an incorrect interpretation, an incorrect autopsy to look back at a thing that the Democratic Party did not do at all and then say it's actually that reason. It's not anything that we did so far. It's not that we tack to the right over and over again, despite people like myself and many others saying like, don't do this. You're going to hemorrhage the base. You're going to hemorrhage the base of support. You are going to cut away at your turnout. You're going to cut across many different constituencies that you rely on to create an effective coalition. And it's a very dangerous gamble to assume that you can decouple a lot of these people in the suburbs, a lot of like white women specifically, away from the Republican Party and vote for you instead. I know that they're high propensity voters, but it doesn't matter. There's still plenty of low propensity voters that you have to rely on to win. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party did. They hyper-focused on these key constituencies, despite the fact that polls were seemingly deadlocked after $30 million of ad spend in key suburbs, right? Like it showed, at least I said this time and time again, it showed someone from the outside looking in that the message was not working. And you can have the best ground game possible. You can have, you know, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country door knocking. But if the top-down message that you're communicating is not resonating with people, then you're not going to be able to win an election. You're not going to have the effective turnout necessary to win this election. And that is precisely what happened. Now, does that mean that Trump's messaging was good? Of course not. It wasn't. It was actually pretty bad. And I would even go so far as to say the anti-trans ads were actually a distraction and not good. It was only effective in the DC bubble, I think, and the consultant bubble and the media class that saw those ads and were like, oh my God, this is an incredible ad. Like, they really ruined Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had a silly answer to an ACLU questionnaire, okay? That just shows that she is not the most experienced politician. This was all the way back in, I believe, 2020, right? She literally had to drop out of the primary anyway at that time. That's one thing, okay? But that should not be a campaign killer. If you personally think that that's a campaign killer, then your campaign is weak. This message across the board should never be able to end a single campaign. Then Teflon Don is real. I mean, the man had the grab him by the pussy tape come out as the October surprise in 2016, and he still won. And since then, there's been a litany of different controversies, including but not limited to straight up undermining American democracy by doing January 6th. And yet people are still voting for him. And one must ask the question, why? And I think overall, the same exact problems that persisted in 2016 when the economy was seemingly very good, right? Especially as opposed to like the post-COVID economy and its recovery. People were still very frustrated with what was going on. The notion that in the wealthiest nation on earth, we have 600,000 people sleeping outside every night. The idea that
I think we should send every single person in the work camps and every single person in my chat, which I assume is coming from Discord. Sorry, every single person in Discord and every single person in my chat right now that is coming from Discord that's like, I bet you're drinking Coke right now in that glass and not iced coffee, to work camps. We should do that. You guys need to, you need to get to work. Okay, you're done. You're done. We need to purge the freaks. Discord right now? What the fuck is this?
We have the concept of medical bankruptcy is an insane phenomenon that doesn't exist in any other OECD nation. Like the fact that 40% of the American public don't, or 60% of the American public doesn't have $400 in emergency spending. Like these are all very real economic anxieties. I'm using that term specifically because it's one thing that people like to hyper focus on that creates volatility, that creates instability, and it creates a base of angry people. And if the Democratic Party is not addressing that anger and addressing their material problems and earnestly telling them, like, we're going to fix that shit, okay? And the other side is looking at that anger and saying, we're going to channel your anger. You have every right to be angry. And you know who you should be angry at? Those who have less than you. You know who you should be angry at? The working poor, the homeless people that are doing crimes left and right, black and brown people, undocumented migrants that are doing incredible amounts of crimes. They're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, and trans people. And the Democratic Party only cares about those people and they don't care about you. And that message resonates with a base of support, not because they are intrinsically evil. That message resonates with a base of support because they're angry. And one of the two major parties is not even remotely interested in addressing that anger and trying to tell them what the solution to that anger actually is and what the real problem is.
So I want to break that into kind of how we the Democratic brand, how we message and all, but also on the policy front. So Joe Biden wins. He tries to kind of build consensus with Bernie. He brings in AOC. He goes to the left on antitrust. He does the Inflation Reduction Act. He does a post-COVID relief bill. He cancels as much debt as he can legally, even though the court is trying to stop him. Mm-hmm. Before the last year, what my view of this is Joe Biden, this consensus Democrat, right? Actually to the right of the consensus for most of his career, kind of somebody that had to be kind of pulled to where the party was going, did something extraordinary, which is he adapted, he changed, he governed in a much more progressive way than I think probably than I expected. I hope that you expected.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems as though whether it's because people didn't feel it or people didn't believe it or the way Democrats talk about policy isn't effective, it didn't seem to matter in terms of how people viewed the Democratic response to the economy, right? They were so angry about inflation. They were angry about a bunch of other issues, and it really didn't matter what Joe Biden said, what Kamala Harris said. They were held responsible. And I'm just wondering how you explain that, right? It seems as though Joe Biden tried to listen to this exact critique, and it didn't matter.
So yes and no. I do agree. There are plenty of things that Joe Biden did, like beefing up the NLRB and letting the FTC rain hell upon these monopolies. There's two issues there, though. One is, I think, something that you will agree with as well, that the Democrats don't campaign year-round in the same way that Republicans do on key issues, and they do have a massive communication problem. That could potentially be solved by having a more robust ecosystem and more collaboration with even the likes of yourself and maybe even someone like myself as well. And they need to always be on. They need to always be counter-messaging against the anti-immigration sentiment. I went back and looked at my commentary from February of 2021 when the story of the Customs and Border Patrol Haitian migrants getting whipped by horseback Customs and Border Patrol people, officers was in the news. And I remember talking about how the Republicans are going to keep hitting the immigrants are doing crime note over and over again because that's the one thing that they have. And it's built around a complete falsehood that undocumented migrants are responsible for incredible amounts of crime. It's not correct. There is no data to suggest this. The data actually shows the exact opposite. Undocumented migrants are your neighbors. They contribute to the economy in very meaningful ways, and they very rarely take anything in return. Why is the Democratic Party not pushing this counter narrative? And they never did. Instead of pushing that counter narrative, which is based in truth, and talk about how undocumented migrants are responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born
I was on Fox.
U.S. citizens are.
For what? For CNN having me on, talking about the Joe Rogan of the left?
Or that fentanyl being trafficked across the U.S. borders are actually not coming in the knapsack of a otherwise law-abiding abuela, but instead it's coming from regular points of entry trafficked by American citizens. 90% of the people that are being apprehended for chemical compounds necessary for fentanyl or direct drugs that they're trafficking across the border are American citizens. This does not track with the narrative that people believe because the narrative is dominated by the right on this issue. They should have been counter-messaging against that, and they should have been putting bills forward in defense of the moves that, for example, Governor Greg Abbott was engaging in Ron DeSantis. I said this even back then, that this is actually a fantastic opportunity for the federal government to show that there is a more tolerant approach, that one, they should have immediately pursued Governor Greg Abbott legally and arrested him for human trafficking and tried to prosecute him for human trafficking. I don't care if it's a constitutional crisis or not. All of this stuff was insanely messed up, and the federal government dropped the ball. I think the Biden administration dropped the ball by not adding additional funds immediately, sending additional funds immediately to places like Chicago and New York, and to figure out a better way to transition a lot of these people and integrate them into the American labor force. And instead, they just got stuck in this like legal limbo for no reason.
So why is it that so Republicans say they sort of lay all these problems at the feet of undocumented immigrants? They say they're responsible for crime. No, they're not. But there are obviously undocumented people. They're people, and some are committing terrible crimes, which they then exploit. But for the most part, these are people that not only are committing crimes at a low rate, but actually are unable to go to the police when they're victims of crimes. Whether that's a domestic violence, they can't go to the police, or whether that's just sort of the quotidian mayhem of living in America, or a boss taking advantage of you. They can't go to the police, right?
Yeah.
Then they say, oh, well, they don't pay taxes. Actually, that's not true. They pay into Medicare, they pay into Social Security, and they don't get the benefits of it back. And then they say, well, they're driving up the cost of housing. I do not believe that undocumented people are the reason a house costs $450,000 where it used to cost $350,000.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were executives at BlackRock. The Guatemalan migrants are mass purchasing houses and making sure that everyone's a permanent renter. That's the point, though. But it's not a trans person that's your landlord. It's not an undocumented immigrant that's your landlord that's raising the cost of rent. It's not your manager is not an undocumented immigrant.
There are two big problems, though. One is there are a lot of people saying this, and it doesn't break through because there is this right-wing media system.
Is that man drinking Starbucks right now? Hey, notice how I'm not an antisocial weirdo and didn't actually yell at him over that and then nuke the entire conversation? You should probably also follow suit. Here's a lesson for many of you in the chat, many young, like-minded individuals who want to be activists. Okay? It's called Be Normal. That's how it works.
That puts out this one story. And the second problem is, Democrats really don't have trust on this issue with the people that they're trying to persuade to see it our way, which I think goes to the point you made before, right? Which is, why is it that Donald Trump can meander around the country rambling, committing what in any other era would be, if not like campaign ending,
This argument that a lot of people are defending immigrants and it's just the right wing making this narrative is such cope. Wait, what do you mean? No one is defending immigrants. That's the problem.
Campaign harming, ridiculous statement.
Pick your battles is probably a better way to put it. No, be normal and pick your battles. You're right. Pick your battles, but also be normal. Be normal is very important.
And gaffes, sure. That he can basically be a strategic mess. But Kamala Harris has to hit every point exactly right. She says the wrong thing on The View, or there's a bad interview from 2020. Those things can be campaign ending. And I think, to your point, it goes to something deeper, a lack of core vision or motivating mission for the current Democratic Party.
Yeah, something that is an understandable, easy to communicate, simple policy that you can put your campaign around. So we agree on the messaging front a little bit, at least, or the asymmetry of how much right-wing media dominates the ecosystem, the media ecosystem in general, all the way from independent outlets down to traditional media, where, as far as I understand it, 73% now, I think, of all news watchers are watching Fox News. 73%. That's an insane percentage. That's an insane number, right? So outside of that, though, I think here is the disagreement that we will have. That while Joe Biden did a bunch of stuff that I agree was positive, it was simply not enough. And that was something that I was always very critical on as well. If you see a homeless person and you chuck them 2 pennies and they're sitting on the corner of the street, technically their material wealth improved by a decent percentage, but he's still going to be mad at you because you just gave him 2 pennies. Why doesn't the homeless person understand that their situation is much better? That is not an effective way to communicate to Americans that, no, you don't understand. Inflation is actually under control, that the economy is rebounding, even if it's objective truth, because most Americans don't understand what inflation is, and they don't understand that prices are not going to go down in that circumstance. And besides that, and I factor this is not just the vibe session communications, but I'm also talking about specifically even the IRA or many of these other like parts of the legislative agenda that that Biden put forth that was more progressive than I expected, from more progressive than even the Obama administration in many respects. But one, they didn't do a good job of communicating any of those victories, in my opinion. They did not. They did not actually like go to the media regularly to show these victories and to showboat and gloat a little bit. Two, a lot of that was also held up in gridlock because we didn't whip votes well enough within our own party. And I think that there was a lot of punishments that should have been dished out to the likes of Joe Manchin and the likes of Kyrsten Sinema, rather than offering a Green senator an opportunity to be a prominent fixture of the Democratic Party. I think that a lot more punishments should have been issued towards these people that use the moment in the spotlight to specifically play the role of a rotating villain in the Democratic Party, which has happened time and time again, all the way from Joe Lieberman to the Maggie Hassans of the world, the Kyrsten Sinemas, the Joe Manchins of the world, and the problem solvers caucuses within Congress in general. These guys need to get whipped into shape.
Yeah, I just like I wish I believed that. I just wish I believed that. Like,
no, but think about it.
But I just like I don't know how much more you could have gotten out of Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. Like Joe Manchin basically was telegraphing the whole time, like I'll walk away. And Joe Biden kept him in the tent. That got judges through. That got
Austin, I'll fight you if you order food from a BDS listed place. Why are you trying to trigger people in the fucking Discord? Sitting over there within striking distance. This motherfucker, bro. He like literally sat his ass down over there.
Act 3. Like I do not believe. Like I think we agree on a lot. I just don't believe that there is a version of the Joe Biden presidency that could have been more successful on legislative policy. I don't see that.
You're not going to appreciate what I'm about to say then.
Hit me.
Use the IRS and also the SEC and maybe even the FTC to investigate as to why Joe Manchin's brother owns a coal mine and whether there's a conflict of interest there. Investigate why Joe Manchin's daughter is selling pharmaceutical products to the state of West Virginia when Joe Manchin is directly at odds with any sort of bill that passes that would lower the cost of pharmaceuticals.
So you want the president
yes.
to politicize these agencies
yes.
and use them to go after people?
Because you want to know why?
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Because they're doing it at the behest of not only the American people, their interests, but they're also, and this is probably going to frustrate everyone in this audience, but here's the thing that I get very frustrated about.
Wide range of listeners across a broad ideological spectrum.
Here's what really frustrates me.
What frustrates you?
The way the Democratic Party operates. They love norms. They love institutions. They love civility. They care about bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship, as though that is something that
some do, some don't.
Yeah, sure. But for the most part, the broad communication coming out of the Democratic Party is that these are the things that they care about. These are the top line issues. We got to protect democracy. We got to preserve our institutions. The problem is the other side doesn't give a shit about that. So I think I want a Democratic Party that fights for me and others who are marginalized, other people that like desperately need help. And I know that the Republican Party is never going to do that. I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, well, at least the Republicans are kind of listening to what I have to say or are communicating, channeling the anger that I feel. Like, I don't care. They're charlatans. They're significantly worse than the Democratic Party. I don't like the Democratic Party for their closeness to the Republican Party. I want them to be a party that actually fights for the working class, for all Americans unconditionally, regardless of ideology. And you can't do that through bipartisanship with an otherwise like hostile entity that is the Republican Party. And I think there is a lot of hypocrisy there, and and hypocrisy that people can see. Hypocrisy is the easiest thing that they can understand. You can't say that these guys are fascists, these guys are racist for 8 years for wanting to build a wall and then turn around and straight up tell Anderson Cooper in that town hall, well, maybe the wall is a good idea and I want to build it myself. I'm going to be the border czar. I'm going to be the border party. You can't do that. Americans look at that and go, so you're admitting that you were just lying for the past 8 years.
Well, it's like, again, though, it's like, I think actually, like you look at somebody like Dan Osborne, right, who ran so far ahead of the Democratic Party, ran as this economic populist, but one of the things he had to do to get there was kind of be tough on immigration. And actually, like, I think part of it goes back to like, if people felt like they knew, like in their bones, like Bernie Sanders being to me like the signal example, like, you know what Bernie's about. You know what he's for. You know what motivates him. You know what he cares about. Same thing for Trump. You know when there are issues he doesn't give a fuck about, and there's issues he really, really cares about. Immigration is one. Trade, right? Like, you know the things that like that have been anti-crime, whatever. That there are things that have been in Donald Trump's like kind of brain slowly losing plasticity that are like kind of solid in there. And for Bernie, we know why he's in politics, and that gives a politician the space to kind of challenge orthodoxies in the party or kind of run counter to it to signal to the people you need to signal to. Now, like, you say, oh, you can't call them fascist and then also work with them. Like, yeah, but at the same time, I just don't know what to do with this nuance. Joe Biden, like, I am glad Joe Biden did the Inflation Reduction Act and an infrastructure bill and a gun bill and the CHIPS Act and a bunch of other stuff. I'm glad he was able to do all of those things. I'm glad that he was able to use his kind of like moderate brand, whatever, to kind of bring people in and get some stuff done. Like, I don't think the country is better off if he didn't do those things. So like, you describe it as hypocrisy. Like, it's compromise. Like, politics requires compromise.
The Republican Party rarely ever compromises. They're uncompromising. You only have to beat them.
But that's not true, though, right? Like, I agree with that on Trump, but that's just not true. Like, they did compromise, right? There are plenty of people on the Republican side that were furious at Republican senators for going along with some of these Biden bills, right? Like, those are people that did compromise.
Yeah, there is a million examples, however, of Republicans that are obstructionists that I'm sure you also love presenting, that go back to their town halls and lie about all the money that they brought back home from the bills that they voted against. So ultimately, we now know that political polarization is set in a way that never really existed in American history until the last couple of decades, right? I think that parties originally were more geopolitically focused on their immediate needs, like statewide needs. So you saw this dramatic shift, and now the Republican Party, especially with Mitch McConnell under the Obama administration, showcased that like permanent obstructionism is not punishable, and that gridlock is always considered the administrative party's problem. If there's any sort of gridlock, it's the fault of the leadership. And Americans hate gridlock.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reason why I was talking about Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, because that was a massive moment where like they actually ended up protecting the Republican Party because they were never going to vote for these bills anyway.
Pod Save America has a negative impact on our polity. Prove me wrong. Okay, dude. Again, going back to pick your battles and be normal. I know we're supposed to be civil, but he's so casual about immigration and anti-crime, i.e. killing innocent civilians. Innocent people. Like, first and foremost, okay, I don't think it's appropriate to assume that the Pod Johns are in favor of, killing migrants. Okay, that's not correct. Number two, okay, I talk to people who are infinitely more disagreeable than the Pod Johns on a regular basis. Okay? And I offer them the same charity when I have a normal conversation with them, a normal discussion with them. There are polite disagreements in this conversation that spanned over 2 hours. Okay? You need to calm the fuck down. The job here is not to own my interlocutor in the marketplace of ideas. Like, I do not consider the Pod Johns to be my enemy. Okay? Especially when they are offering a platform to someone such as myself and being rather kind, allowing me to talk my shit. Okay? Calm down.
Anyway, and now the entire conversation was about like madness within the Democratic Party's caucuses, like, oh, they can't get their ducks in a row, right? Like, that was genuinely frustrating to me, because it's like, if you would whip your votes immediately, then you could showcase that the Republican Party is standing in the way of progress. But that's just like, that is legislative minutia. What is more important to talk about is broad, sweeping legislative changes or a agenda that might even come across as bold and radical in the interest of the American working class. Joe Biden said he wanted to do the public option. Everybody knew that wasn't real. He never talked about it after. He used the public option. He slotted that in the primaries when the party was primed to the Bernie left, and everyone was like, trying to communicate their own populist version of what Bernie was doing. And Joe Biden won the primaries and effectively tabled the discussion about healthcare. This is still a major problem, regardless. Like, yes, negotiating pharmaceutical prices and ensuring that insulin prices are capped at $35, which is now going to be looking like a Trump victory when he's in office. It doesn't matter. It's still good for the American people. So that's great. But like, that is good, but that's not enough. Yeah. And I think that when you don't do that, when you have this very technocratic, third-way neoliberal approach, but you sprinkle in a little bit of like anti-corporate, anti-billionaire populism that Joe Biden certainly did, it's not, you're a rudderless ship. You're not communicating effectively like what you are about. And when you don't have a North Star that every single person can point to and say, this is what the party is about, your enemies can portray you as whatever they want. And that's why the anti-trans ads are even remotely effective, because you can make the Democratic Party look clownish and inconsistent and even silly and hyper-focused on whatever key issues there are, because one, they rarely ever focus on universality in programs. Everything has to be means tested, which I think is both on the policy front and on the politics front, garbage. Focus on universal programs, because that way you can cut across every single group, and you can disproportionately target marginalized populations, black populations, brown populations, and trans people. These people do not exist in a vacuum. They're not magical, mystical beings that are not experiencing the shocks of the market, or they still have to pay rent. They still need workplace protections. They still need, they still need the cost of medicine to go down, right? So universal programs capture the attention of all Americans, including this majority white, angry population that is finding themselves in the throes of the Republican reactionary movement. And so they need to do that. And if they don't do that, then the subtle populism of the right is always going to be the only game in town, and they're going to be able to present themselves as anti-establishment while they have billionaires parading around all the campaign stops, like Elon Musk trying to do that X logo every time he jumps, like a child.
God,
I hate Elon Musk.
That is the trick, though, man. They're like, it does speak to just how far, one place where. So if you listen to the Harris campaign's advisors talking to Dan Pfeiffer, I know you did, and you had problems with it. But one place where they agreed is that, hey, everyone's saying, oh, this trans ad, it actually might not have been their most effective ad.
Not.
And they were trying to, and what Quentin Folk said was that, they were actually really trying to target it to get at black men. And it looks like maybe that didn't work, right? That's that sort of, we'll see, we're going to get more data. But the point that the ad makes is just that, Democrats are weird. Democrats are strange, right? And they use trans people as a cudgel to do that. But to the larger point, you have billionaires, just literally the wealthiest man in the world.
The top seven donors this election cycle all donated to the Republican Party, and they were donating $100 million, $200 million. It was crazy.
How do you think about the fact that in right-wing media right now, and right-wing adjacent media, they are managing to be both the party of the wealthiest oligarchs in the world and the kind of traditional moral set trying to impose a specific way of living on people, and anti-establishment, kind of rebellious politics?
It's Nazi Germany, straight up. It's just pure fascism. That's all this is. It worked. It worked 100 years ago. And it's seemingly working right now. And it's not just the United States of America. It's all across Western Europe. The only country that bucked the trend of the incumbency disadvantage seemingly was Mexico. Mm-hmm. One must ask the question why an old doddering man who was still, relatively telegenic, even though he believed in wood elves, duendes, was able to get a tremendous amount of popularity and then become the transition candidate that actually passed the torch to a younger woman, Claudia Sheinbaum. I'm, of course, talking about Mexico. I'm talking about AMLO is the old man. Claudia Sheinbaum was his spiritual and ideological successor in the Morena party. Why did that happen? Why was AMLO so popular? And why is Claudia Sheinbaum also incredibly popular? Why did Claudia Sheinbaum win the election with even larger margins of victory than AMLO did? It's because they expanded the welfare state, they increased minimum wage, and they made a whole bunch of decisions that genuinely improved the material conditions of a lot of people in Mexico. And that's something that people will never forget. We talked about the black vote for a second. As far as voter patterns goes, older black populations, older black voters as a voting bloc, is a more reliable voting bloc for the Democratic Party than younger black voters are. One must ask the question why. That is because people remember the last time the Democratic Party did something for black people, did something bold, expended social and political capital for black people. And that is something that people do not forget. If you give people things, they will not forget that. That's why there was a lot of dummies who thought, oh, Trump's back, we're going to get some stimmy checks. It's not going to happen, but they still remember that because they think, oh yeah, Trump gave us stimmy checks. Mm-hmm. I mean,
well, Joe Biden expanded. I mean, I
know.
And by the way, I'm not pushing back on any of this because I don't agree with the sentiment. I just I am trying in the weeks after this election to just question these sort of statements, because then it's well, Joe Biden expanded the child tax credit, made a huge difference for millions of children.
No, absolutely. The expansion of the child tax credit was fantastic, but it didn't continue. It was so successful and it didn't continue. do you think American people know why that happened?
I don't.
Who's at fault if American people don't know why that happened?
I think some of it is Democrats, some of it is the mainstream media, some of it is the right-wing media, and some of it, by the way, is the left. It is the media of the left, right? Like the first couple of years, there's been so many moments where my great frustration, I think, in the way politics is talked about is often people do not want to do the work of figuring out who's actually responsible, right? Like Republicans will shut down the
Don't worry, I addressed the left point as well.
Government, and mainstream sources will say Washington gridlock continues, right? Or Joe Biden will be stymied in some way, or Barack Obama will be stymied.
Now?
Why did Barack Obama?
Wait, what? Fuck the USA. Fuck the USA. Let's go. You suck now. You suck now. Shut up, Dankus Canadian. Enjoy the fucking tariffs, okay? We are going to invade Canada, man.
Obama do this? Why didn't Barack Obama do that when he had a majority, right? He said, well, because it's actually, you know what? In the Senate, having 49 votes to get rid of the filibuster and having 50 votes to get rid of the filibuster is a difference between like, doing a ton of shit and not being able to do anything. That's not the fault of 49 people. That's the result of one person. Yeah.
Can I bring up something really quick? This conversation that you and I are having, have you ever heard a Republican have this conversation?
Well, what do you mean? Like Republicans don't talk this way?
Have you ever heard a Republican go, sorry, we couldn't get this done because we simply did not have the votes? Is that ever like a real significant front-facing public conversation that the Republicans have?
I mean, I feel like you want the answer to be no, but like, I do think the answer is yes.
I can't recall a time. Maybe no. I'm asking you.
No, I think on their side, like I think they have over the last decade slowly but surely gotten rid of the people who are pointing out the actual things that stand in their way, right? Like they went after Kevin McCarthy. Better. They went at and sometimes that works. Sometimes that leaves them like pretty well stuck. I mean, like Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He didn't have the votes, right? There was a big conversation about why he didn't have the votes. That like there have been the Republican base like furious with spending bills that were passed, right?
What did Donald Trump do after when John McCain struck down the Affordable Care Act?
What did he do?
He took out the individual mandate regardless. He did.
Well, he did what the same thing a Democratic president would do. Do as much as you can legislatively, and when it fails, use your executive power, which is what Biden has done on student loans and a bunch of other issues.
Yeah, so my point is, he still got the most significant aspect of his, agenda across, and in the process, he utilized the bully pulpit to laser John McCain nonstop and effectively bully John McCain in a way that I've never seen a Democratic president turn around and communicate about Joe Biden. I'll hear it about the left, about how they're naysayers, how they're spoilers. I never hear it about conservative Democrats. And I think it's the coalition.
We talk about that.
It's a coalition that you want to have, is my point. And I think Democrats, win or lose, want to win by their own like established policies and the way that they want to win. And they're willing to lose if necessary, as long as they still maintain the overarching attitude that they have.
I just think that is,
or maybe they're just bad and wrong.
Well, I just think that I think people need to be persuaded. I think people need to be.
Biden student loans, this man's Delulu. I mean, he did abolish a bunch of student loans with the executive power. He did do that. He should have gone further, but he did do that.
Persuaded. Like David Plouffe talking to Pfeiffer yesterday. He's like, look, you go to a swing state. You got a certain percentage of liberals and progressives. You got a certain percentage of conservatives, and you got this vast swath of moderates. You need them. Now, I think where you're right is like there is something about a Democratic establishment figures that feel more comfortable with a Liz Cheney.
We're going to get to the genocide stuff in a second. Don't worry.
At the table.
A big chunk of this conversation devolves into talking about
with
Israel.
Sitting at the table.
It's gross.
And that the disagreements with Liz Cheney are more kind of are acceptable, and the disagreements to the left are less acceptable.
But one must ask the question, why is that acceptable? Liz Cheney is anti-LGBT. Liz Cheney is anti-abortion. Liz Cheney is anti-Democratic Party. Liz Cheney is the daughter of a rabid, warmongering, terrorist sociopath, Dick Cheney. And yet there are Democrats who are more comfortable with her than people who also would totally be on board with the Democratic Party, but I don't know, have maybe sometimes identical opinions of Liz Cheney on even LGBT issues. Like Joe Rogan is a great example of this.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has consistently utilized and weaponized in the most cynical ways possible identity politics. And I say this as someone who is infinitely more progressive than the average Democrat on these issues. They just use it. They use it against Bernie. They use it against every single person, and now they're dropping it themselves. That makes every Democrat look like a silly fool. That makes it does. In the eyes of Americans, they go, you called us racist, you called us transphobic, you called us crazy, and now you're saying, okay, my bad, we got to drop this woke shit. Like, of course people are going to go, all right, I guess like I'm primed into now believing the Republicans. Like, you're pushing your base towards being more open-minded to right-wing policies. That's the only thing you're doing. And that's how and that's the only thing you're doing when you don't actually claw back a lot of the things that the Republicans, the former Republican administration, engages in. Like, Democrats are very good at trying to fix the deficit. They're the only real deficit hawks, right? Republicans certainly don't care. They only use it as a weapon to wield to communicate against the Democratic agenda. But outside of that, like, on foreign policy, Joe Biden said he was going to be an effective foreign policy leader. He did NATO. He kept talking about, NATO Jack, AUKUS, as though that was going to be.
He loved talking about AUKUS. Like, I've never been more.
Oh, dude, there's a Ryan Ruth mention coming.
I've never been more like nervous in politics, like other than the day before an election, than when Joe Biden was still in the race and he did that press conference. And he was like, he talked about AUKUS. It's like, no one knows what the fuck AUKUS is.
Yeah. Okay, that's a deep cut.
That is a deep cut.
But like, Joe Biden was like, I'm the adult in the room, Jack. I'm going to bring back America into the global stage. The way that the American public sees that is like, there's a war in Ukraine, right? And that's not even Joe Biden's fault. Like, I understand that. That's Vladimir Putin decided, I'm going to do the insane thing. I'm going to invade Ukraine. That's psychotic, right? But the way that people see it, they're like, why are we giving money to Ukraine when we're not fixing the potholes? Why are we giving money to Ukraine when the ISPs suck here? What the hell's going on? Why are we giving money to Ukraine where we don't have healthcare? We have homeless people everywhere. And then on top of that, they see that instability as like something that is Joe Biden's fault. Fair or unfair, doesn't matter. They attribute it to Joe Biden. Same thing with Israel-Palestine. They look to what is going on and they're like, this is insane. Like, why Biden will come out and say, or used to come out and say, we're going to do a two-state solution. Benjamin Netanyahu the next day would be like, fuck the two-state. What do you mean? How about no state? Literally the next day. And Biden kept trying to do this thing where he was like finger wagging, where he's like, I'm gonna give him a heart-to-heart, real man-to-man. For a lot of Americans, they saw that as like, you're weak, you're old, you're weak, you're feeble, and you're getting dog-walked by an American ally in a very public and very embarrassing way. And there's a metric ton of violence that's happening on top of that. Like, he ironically destroyed the goodwill that a lot of people had coming into his administration with the last, I guess, like post-Afghanistan withdrawal. Everything was bad after that with respect to Joe Biden's foreign policy.
It also just like it's also tied to.
I still defend the Afghan withdrawal, by the way, and I think the Democrats also dropped the ball on that too, because they should have stood 10 toes down and said that was the right thing to do. We exhibited political courage. And for the record, Republicans tried to do the 13 of our best soldiers died in Afghanistan thing over and over again, the cynical thing that they tried to do.
Republicans are shameless. Democrats are less so.
No, they should be shameless.
I'm describing what the issue is. Yeah, I mean, part of this though too, like
they cut a bunch of stuff here. I said Democrats should have said 67 soldiers died in Afghanistan under the Trump reign versus the 13 that died under like, there's a reason why no soldier should die, but there's a reason why, this is significantly limited, the casualties, because we pulled out. You were on Waters' show.
They lost because.
Yeah, I saw. We'll look at that later.
Like, huge policy problem in how the Biden administration has responded.
They cut it because it's an hour and 50. The conversation took 2 hours, Chad. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. I think that's the reason why they cut a bunch of stuff. They cut my Ryan Ruth joke too.
To the war in Gaza. But on that issue, a bunch of foreign policy issues, a bunch of domestic issues, some of the problem has been Joe Biden gave State of the Union, which was good. And everyone's like, okay, that's what happened, right?
Okay.
But other than that, he has been such an ineffective communicator and it has gotten so much worse over
I'm glad that they cut out some of my jokes. I definitely made a bunch of jokes that probably what. Uh-huh. Oh yeah, of course.
the last year.
Yeah, because he's old as fuck.
I know. But like, we're in this moment where we're like kind of trying to like, what went wrong? What about this? What about that? People are so mad. Like the people are like they're like the answers that Kamala's advisors gave were unsatisfying. Yeah, they are unsatisfying. But so much of this is just like there was a giant anti-incumbent fervor around the world. Joe Biden was completely unable to articulate a defense of his policies, right? Like the fact that there is inflation and people are mad about inflation is not a reason alone. That explains that can explain why we lost if you accept that we had no agency in competing against that argument. But like Joe Biden certainly had just could not communicate effectively.
I think you'll see what happens when someone effectively bullies corporations, regardless of being a right-wing Republican, in the upcoming Trump administration. Things are going to get significantly worse for every single person, including the people that voted for Donald Trump. One of the funniest aspects of the tariffs conversation that's happening right now is that Donald Trump is going to implement broad tariffs on 45% of all trade that comes in and out of the United States of America. Mexico, Canada, and China comprise 45% of all trade. He wants to tariff every single one. Tariffs are obviously an entry fee that like the American corporations are going to be paying. None of the countries are going to be paying for these tariffs. It's a policy that's going to destroy drop shippers, which overwhelmingly vote for Donald Trump, and the Trump merchandise industry. So that's pretty funny. But having said that, it's going to be devastating for the economy. Now, what do I think Trump will do in the process? He'll obviously use tariffs to basically get corporations and industries and sector leaders on board with his agenda. So when he says jump, they say how high, or I'm going to slap you with tariffs and it's going to actually punish you. It's going to hurt your bottom line. And I think that's part of the reason why they're going to do that. The other reason is it's a regressive tax. It's a broad sales tax on all consumers that disproportionately affects the working poor, and Republicans love that shit. But he also, at times, I think, will just institute the Defense Production Act or something. Like we'll see it. We kind of saw it in COVID as well when it was a necessity. But that's the thing. Like the American government is powerful. All governments are powerful, but the American government is especially powerful. It's the wealthiest nation on the planet. And the way that it runs is basically, it's like 50 companies in a trench coat. We are working at the behest of corporations. We feed them with our tax dollars that turn into subsidies for them. They utilize those subsidies to, I guess, lower production costs, but then they use that to increase their profit margins and engage in what used to be illegal pre-Ronald Reagan, stock buybacks and the like, market manipulation of all different sorts. And we're constantly deregulating the economy. And I think that it's not just about having like a populist message. It's about actually implementing said populist message and show who your real enemies are. Like not be afraid to say, these people are fucking your life up. And if you are truly the pro-working class party, as the Democrats want to be, as they claim they were historically, right? And there were certainly times when they were, then you have to say these corporations and the wealthy that have given us money, as well as the Republican Party, and always have been hedging their bets, are the real reason why you're feeling this economic anxiety, the real reason why you feel hopeless, that you will never be able to own a home, that you'll never be able to retire. And the Republicans are always in defense of them. They will distract you with lies. They will say your fellow neighbors, your God-fearing Christian, Muslim, whatever, Jewish neighbors are your enemy, when in fact, we know what the problem is. So we're going to bring them to heel. This kind of messaging is terrifying, obviously, for many different reasons. And it will never happen within the Democratic Party. But in the absence of that,
I don't think that's true. Why?
We'll see. No, I think you'll just get focus grouped messaging and means testing about the opportunity economy, which Kamala Harris presented at a time when people were, when wage growth had never actually caught up to the cost of living
and cost of housing.
Yeah,
which by the way is like you need to be, but this is like
you need to deflate housing. That's you
need to build vast amounts of housing.
Yeah,
the
federal jobs program. Get these fucking incels to work.
But we got to get these incels to work.
No, get them to work. Give them whether they like it or not, they're going to get good, well-paying jobs with good benefits. They're going to get socialized medicine.
Got to put the incels to work.
And they're going to work. None of this neat stuff anymore. They can't be online all the time. They're too online.
It's your business. Now you're coming after your own business.
It's fine. I'm happy for I would drop everything if we got universal health care and a federal jobs program and we're building public housing all around the country. That's fine.
There's a place where the left, the online left and the online right meets, and it kind of meets a little bit at people who think RFK has some good ideas. a little bit. What do you think? What do you like? What is the appeal there?
Cranks.
Just cranks?
Yeah, anti-establishment cranks. There's a lot of them. There's the Tulsi Gabbard constituency, which is like marginal. It's not all that significant. But yeah, I think that the online left is not as robust a media ecosystem as like people think it is in general. And besides that, they don't have any sort of like political motion regardless, right? I have disagreements with the closest Congress members that are ideologically as closely aligned with myself as possible, but I still have many disagreements with them. And outside of that, I think like these guys that like RFK Jr. because they think he's going to make America healthy again. They just like the crank stuff. Yeah, that's what it is.
I mean,
Oh, another part that was cut, I think, was when I was actually talking about the left media ecosystem and how, like, I dropped names. I said Chapo Trap House, Majority Report, Drop Site News. All these places, like, we have been very aggressive defenders of things that Biden has done when it's actually in the interest of serving the American working class. Like,
You talked to, like, when I'm really, like, 4 years, I guess 8 years ago, Jesus.
it wasn't
Remember,
cut.
like, after Trump won the first time, what I was feeling at the time, which I'm still feeling now, is that, like, the
I
two
gotta pee.
challenges, right, is that, like, at a moment where someone like Trump is ascendant, like, how do you keep this big left together, this big tent together from, yes, it includes the kind of pro-democracy, anti-Trump right, runs all the way to the far left and leftists. How do you keep that big group of people together? And I do think, like, you're right. Like, there is just, in part because there's just so much money behind it. Like, the online right is, I think it's bigger and more influential, but it also knows how to get on board, right? Like, it knows, like, it fights, it has disagreements, it pushes, but then it knows, like, for our ends, for our goals, we all need to get behind, whether it's Trump or in previous elections, it was getting behind, like, Romney-like figures, McCain-like, like, they get behind those figures. And sometimes it feels like on the left, there's no moment at which we say, all right, we've had the fight, we've had the debate, we disagree on a whole bunch of stuff. Hey, everybody, we're gonna get together, we're gonna make sure that we stop Donald Trump, we elect Joe Biden as much as we elect Kamala Harris. Like, that moment doesn't come. And, like, I'm not saying that Democrats in power aren't in part responsible for that. I think part of what we need to do is figure out a politics that brings people in. But it does like, everyone is responsible.
Yeah, I think just as I was very critical of Bernie Sanders' campaign, despite, still loving Bernie, because he was nowhere near as aggressive as he could have been in the primaries, and it, definitely should have probably gone on more like independent media route in a similar vein to Donald Trump. I am still, because I blame the fault on Bernie's campaign strategies in the primaries, despite recognizing the structural hurdles of, like, a left-wing populace coming out of a Democratic Party primary, where it's like the laser-focused audience that goes out and votes at those things, or like the MSNBC watcher base that is, like, objectively terrified of someone like that because people are saying he's going to, start executing wealthy people. It's still his fault. And it's still the campaign's fault in this regard as well. And that's why I brought forward the point that, like, you can have 1.5 billion, right? You can have ground game. None of that matters if the message is not actually addressing the real issues that Americans are facing. And the reason why I think the Republicans can, go out and vote for the Republican Party and don't usually sit it out, I guess, and instead are able to say, suck it up and say, yeah, we're still going to vote for Donald Trump, is because there are single issue voters out there, and Trump, they know that Trump is going to protect it. People that like guns are going to be like, I like my guns. I want my guns to be protected. I want to be able to marry my gun. I want to be able to have sex with my gun. I know Donald Trump is going to be the guy that lets that happen. And I know the Democrats are going to, shun me for wanting to have sex with my gun. So that guy's going to go and vote for Trump regardless, right? On the other side, though, if your top line communication and your major policy prescriptions are like, we have to preserve these institutions, we have to preserve civility, and we have to preserve democracy at a time when Americans are like, I don't give a fuck about democracy, just lower the price of eggs, then there's no way that I could outflank the Democratic Party and get people to vote for Kamala Harris that, in a way that sticks, in a way that is going to be successful, no matter how much influence I wield.
But it's not, I'm not even just talking about, yes, take your point.
Most people are just not voting. That's the problem.
But the challenge, right, is that, like, there are, like, these three, let's say you say there's these three kind of media ecosystems. There's the right-wing one, there's the kind of mainstream one, and there's the left one. The one on the right is built to attack Democrats. The one in the middle is built to attack Washington and politics, and the one on the left is built to attack Democrats. It is. I mean, like, I think they're trying to pressure Democrats to be a more moral and just version of itself.
I think I probably spend more time shitting on the Republican Party than the Democratic Party, but yeah.
But I'm saying when we're talking about, like, when the right is talking, when right-wing media, it is trying to be a team player, and it is attacking Democrats and supporting Republicans. The middle is attacking both, and the left is attacking Democrats and Republicans. There is no place, right? There is no, like, big kind of fun, exciting media environment.
Yeah.
Outside of, I guess, fucking this table, where, like, you have a lot of people that are, like, critical of the Democratic Party, annoyed by the same things we're talking about, but ultimately it's just like, we got to win, and we have to get behind these people.
Yeah. Well, but again, it is because for many people on the right-wing ecosystem, like, they have their toys, they have their treats, and the Republicans are giving them those toys and those treats, whereas the Democrats are offering what?
No, I agree. That's
like,
where
what
I'm
are they
like,
offering?
Well, yeah, no, I know. We got to
Like,
fucking
it
figure it
doesn't
out.
matter to me. I'm rich. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I probably might go to prison if Project Esther gets kicked in, or if they denaturalize me or something. But
Hey, come on.
you know, I mean, who knows? We'll see. But
You can, but I mean, you can be rich abroad.
that is true.
What are you
But
talking
my
about?
point is, but I like being here.
Yeah.
I like trying to solve some of the problems in America,
Yeah.
at least.
And then, like,
but
the food's
overall,
great, yeah.
the point is not that I'm rich. The point is that the point I'm making is that like I care about my fellow Americans. I care about them, their lives getting better. They're improving their material conditions, and I recognize that if Democrats keep losing, then Republicans are going to keep ruining this country further. And I want the Democrats to win. I want to be the most regime-pilled
Yeah.
propaganda minister you've ever seen.
That's what I want for
But
you.
I can't do that if the Democratic Party
Well,
is not offering anything.
I guess what here's what I think that's all fair. I guess like what I'm trying to see is like, what is the path to the Democrats creating the kind of story that's backed by candidates, that's backed by message, that's backed by policy, that's backed by having the right enemies, telling that kind of story, right? And then in concert with that, like it is a kind of like we do need a kind of like virtuous circle where then more and more people in left media start to accept that the vehicle for changing this country for the better is the Democratic Party.
If we were consistently critical, I mean, I can't speak for everybody else on the left.
No.
I don't know who you're talking about when you say this, but like I can speak to my friends that are over at Dropsite News, former Intercept guys like Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm. I can speak to Majority Report that was way more in the tank for Kamala than I was, for sure. Like they were very openly more excited at the prospect of Kamala Harris. I was definitely a lot more depressed by no matter who wins, we are still cooked. Was my attitude, but like certainly understanding and recognizing that Donald Trump is going to be far worse than Kamala Harris, of course, and Chapo Trap House, right? So these are some of the largest media companies out there on the left, right, outside of the orbit of the Democratic Party. Every single one of these outlets, myself included, talked more about the Biden administration's accomplishments with the NLRB, with Lena Khan at the FTC, with like trust busting, and numerous other accomplishments that the Democratic Party actually brought forward than they did, and it didn't matter. My point is, we always defended the Afghan withdrawal unconditionally. You never saw that you barely saw that on MSNBC. We always defended that. We always defended Lena Khan. We always defended the NLRB. We always defended the symbolic move that Joe Biden made when he went to the UAW picket line. We didn't forget that. We talked about that. It didn't matter. It's not enough, especially when there's so much that Joe Biden did, I think, outside of the economic pressures that Americans were experiencing that was certainly going to play a pivotal role in the election. But there's so much that he did in the month of October in 2023 that just...
You're right. It was a mistake that I didn't bring up the Talk to a Pod and all the stuff that Haley Welch has done at the behest of the Democratic Party. Doors open. Okay. Well, I missed it.
just completely wiped that made it impossible to defend him because it became the major focus of a lot of people. And there's nothing you can do in that moment when people are, seeing exactly what's going on and getting frustrated. He unveiled the right-wing immigration bill on October 5th, 2023. If I might be getting the date wrong, but it was like literally 2 days before October 7th. He did that, and then October 7th happened, and he went and he bear hugged Netanyahu and kept giving, unlimited weapons to Israel over and over again, never restraining Israel. Everybody knew exactly what was going to happen. It had happened before, and it was going to be much worse. And yet, no restraint whatsoever. And it has, I think, diminished America's soft power capabilities on the global stage further. It has eroded America's influence and soft power capabilities in the Western world. Obviously, the global South already knew what was up. They've always known, but they have no power. They have no voice. It doesn't matter. But the populations in Western Europe recognizing what was going on and actually starting to protest against it, I mean, that's different. I'm saying this as someone who's been an advocate for Palestinian emancipation for the past 10 years publicly. I've never seen this groundswell of this massive sea change, this attitude shift in such a dramatic fashion over the course of the last 12 months, and they did not address that at all. And instead, they hugged and kissed neocons and talked about, even in the VP debate, like Israel having the nuclear first strike capability. What an insane conversation we're having after 12 months of genocide. Like that's, Americans fancy themselves to be peaceful people. It's a lie. America's foreign interventions are anything but peaceful. And but even then, the media ecosystem usually just shelters Americans from the genuine devastating impact of America's actions globally. But for that reason, Americans can at least feel like they're peaceful doves, which is why Donald Trump, despite never being a peaceful dove, was able to effectively communicate that he was actually anti-Iraq war against Hillary Clinton in 2016, which was a resilient message that actually showcased him as more moderate than Hillary Clinton in the eyes of many Americans. He did 4 years of no peaceful dove shit whatsoever. And then he turned around and after October 7 was still able to effectively outflank the Democrats on this issue, despite the fact that he got $100 million from Miriam Adelson, Sheldon Adelson's wife.
I think your food is outside. The
potentially
gate.
annex the West Bank and put rabid evangelical freaks like Mike Huckabee as the Israeli ambassador. Like these guys are insane.
It's why it's very heartbreaking for me too. Look, I think one of the reasons people will be mad that you're on the show is because you're like a proud anti-Zionist, right? Like you said that. I've gotten shit for saying.
I was going to say anti-Semite. I was like, damn.
Joining us today, anti-Semite dumbass.
Yeah.
No, but like I actually like 2 or 3 years ago, I said on Ponte America like that I described myself as a Zionist, which got people upset too. But what I said then and what I still say now is, and I actually had the same conversation with Bernie, is like you ought to denounce the destruction and death in Gaza. You ought to denounce the moral abomination that is taking over the West Bank on its own terms, because it is morally reprehensible.
Yeah.
It is despicable. These are war crimes being committed against innocent Palestinians who are paying with their lives for the crimes of Hamas. And you don't need to go further than that. What I'm saying is it is also terrible for Israel, and you don't need to care about that.
No, I agree.
No, I know.
I do care about
that. What Bernie said, I always appreciate what he has to say on this issue. What he said is that basically even Israel does not understand the way in which they're becoming an isolated pariah nation, and so people will be mad to have someone who is a self-proclaimed anti-Zionist on this show, but like I am someone who has called himself a Zionist, and I am against this because I believe it doesn't serve Israel's interest either. And that to me is what is so devastating about the outcome of this election, in part because of policy, in part because Joe Biden is such an incomprehensible messenger on one of the most delicate and contentious topics in American politics. We now have Donald Trump, who's able to elide what his actual views would be on this issue. And we have seen what happens in Israel when you have someone like Trump in power at a moment of crisis. And now there is Trump back in office here. And if you are concerned about the lives of Palestinians, if you're concerned about continuing instability and violence and death in that region, this election has just made everything so much fucking worse.
American foreign policy being so uniparty on this issue is genuinely frustrating. And it's genuinely damaging for Israel because we recognize how our fellow Americans are becoming more reactionary every single day, especially with this new Trump election. You see people that formerly maybe had different opinions go, you know what, maybe it is good to deport 20 million people violently by utilizing the military potentially. This is something that the Donald Trump administration has said they're going to do.
Well, at the very least, even if people don't believe that'll happen or didn't understand, like these things are not like the expectation that Donald Trump taking all of these extreme positions would be enough. That just wasn't true.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to explain here is that before you know it, people can succumb to reactionary feelings and reactionary sentiment and find themselves in the throes of fascist ideology without even recognizing it. Mm-hmm. And I think examining that is important in an academic setting. That's why we have Holocaust studies, right? That's why we have genocide studies as an entire field to specifically understand exactly how Nazi Germany got to that position or fascist Italy got to the position that it got to. And I think that, you might even disagree with me on this, but like that's where Israel is. That's where Israel is at right now. They have become an incredibly angry culture, an incredibly angry country that has succumbed, especially since the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, who wasn't exactly a great guy for Palestinians either. I mean, he was known as the guy who deliberately tasked the Israeli security forces in breaking the hands of children for stone throwing, right, in the first Intifada. That guy was the off-ramp for peace negotiations with Palestinians, and they assassinated him. And his assassins and people who are backing his assassins, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, like Bezalel Smotrich, are now firmly a part of the Israeli establishment, the current governing
Israeli
coalition.
government.
It's kind of crazy that people have the audacity, people who read Wikipedia pages have the audacity to claim that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to foreign policy. and that I'm out of my element. Like, it is kind of wild that they just rely exclusively on mainstream narratives and the fact that people just genuinely don't know anything about this kind of shit. To just basically say such slanderous statements, you know?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm giving talks in the UK.
there are also hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have protested this government.
Yeah, for different reasons, but yeah, no,
but-
for sure.
Yes. And again, like, I just think it's important. Yes, like, Israel is responsible for Israel's actions, but we do need to separate Benjamin Netanyahu and his conduct from the Israeli people. In the same, that doesn't mean they're not responsible in the same way that America is not George W. Bush, right? But America is responsible for what George W. Bush when he is in command of our armed forces.
Yeah.
But we understand that distinction.
No, of course. The problem is you have to also look at the Overton window, though, in any society, in any culture, in any country, right? And I think that, and I come from, I'm Turkish. Like, I come from a country with a conscription. Like, I understand what ultra-nationalism is. I've lived through it. I've experienced it. I know what it's like when Turkish people hear me say, like, that the Armenian genocide is real, for example. Like, that's like a non-starter, right? That's like, you can't say that. What are you talking about? I learned in school that it wasn't real, right? Like, I understand how a country can become more and more right-wing, where even the liberal position is still committed to the maintenance of an apartheid. And I think that is where we're at with Israel, and we have to restrain Israel as we are the number one partner of Israel, whether it be the weapons that we give to Israel, whether it be the financial support that we give to Israel, or whether it be the trade partnership that we have, or the financial partnership that we have with Israeli companies. We have a lot of influence over what Israel does, and I think over the course of the last couple of decades, especially with Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel has become a more and more right-wing nation.
Yes, it is a country that now views itself as being isolated and under siege, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of this is...
This is really funny. When people say it's totally on site for commies like Hassan, what are you going to do, man? You're going to come to my house and suck my cock? Is that what you want? Huh? You saw the meat pic? Are you doing meat watch? Huh? You saw the meat on Maine and you're like, damn, I want it in my mouth. Is that what it is, big boy? I unbanned you. You can speak. You can speak on it if you want. Is that your goal? A little bit of meat watch for you, huh? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to come over, you're going to suck my dick dry, huh? Is that what you're going to do? It's on site for commies like you? Okay, dude. Okay, psycho solitaire. Type of motherfucker that literally perishes at the mere prospect of having a social interaction with a fucking cashier. Dumbass.
Like, we have moved in the wrong direction in a bunch of, like, this has all gotten to be so kind of hopeless. Israel faces recrimination from around the world, feels isolated, feels like it needs to turn inward to protect itself, views itself as being
it's going
under
the Rhodesia route.
attack. Well, it's like, the question right to me is, like, how do you break that cycle? I agree it requires a ton of American pressure, but it also, I think, like, the turn, like, anti-Zionist fervor, like, to me, like, anti-Zionism itself is not a path to where we ultimately need to go, which is a peace and Palestinian self-determination, right? Like, that's what I believe in. Like, that's what I care about. That's where I want this. Like Israel as a country that no longer feels constantly under threat. Palestinians being able to live in peace and safety without being under occupation, in control of their own destiny. And to me, like, that, like, it's become a kind, like, that is a two-state solution. And anything that drives towards that, I think, is ultimately the direction we need to go. Right now, we're moving in the opposite direction, which is why this all feels so hopeless to me.
Well, I mean, look, I used to be of that same mindset maybe like a decade ago as well, where I resort to the likes of Avi Shlaim on this, or Ilan Pappé on this, in terms of, like, my analysis of it. But, like, the settlement operations in the so-called peace process that were, again, funded by America as well, and still funded to this day by, like, the likes of CUFI, Christians United for Israel, which is the oftentimes not talked about part of this equation that is significant, and dare I say more significant than whatever Jewish Americans think about Israel. Like, it's the right-wing evangelical Christians that are the number one funders of the settlement project.
But it's also, like, no consequences for the expansion of settlements.
Yeah, well, that's...
And the use of settlement, like, what was once expanding settlements as part of a negotiation tactic towards what would ultimately have been a solution is now just a plan to take over the West Bank.
Yeah, no, it's developing Bantustans, which they did. And my point is that that has made it virtually impossible for a two-state solution to exist, which is why I think that like Israel already maintains sovereignty, and that as an apartheid state, what needs to happen is to abolish the apartheid.
So Hassan is a fascist, haha. We all believe in violence at the end of the day, right? What are you saying? I just said, if you want to come over and suck my cummies, I'm not interested, okay? I like that you not so subtly threatened me with death and then immediately are like, oh, you seemingly are a fascist and all you know is violence. Like, what kind of pussy shit is this? The fuck? That's a crazy fucking... That's crazy backtracking. It's totally on site. Cope, it's coming for you. And you helped create this atmosphere. It's totally on site for commies like Hassan. Literally unbanned. 4 minutes later, so Hassan is a fascist. We all believe in violence at the end of the day, right? Fucking idiot. Bitch.
Which is something that, unfortunately, many Israelis refuse to reckon with, at least right now, because that would mean 5 million Palestinians, and including the 2.5 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, would now constitute a demographic majority in this area, in this land that Israel enforces sovereignty over, and that is terrifying for its demographic destiny, its demographic goals in general.
Well, just also like, okay, that's something to add. Like, you can point, like, it's also something that Israel is never going to assent to.
No, I understand that, which is why I think like the pressure campaigns, albeit minimal, but the change in attitude and the way that like a lot of people see this dynamic is significant, and I think that inevitably things will change, and we're seeing it right now. We're seeing it with the ICC decision. Like, this is a truly unique moment. We're seeing it with the ICJ court case. We'll see where it goes, but I think that I understand why even members in the State Department that I would directly be at odds with in the way that we examine the world have from the start tried to say this can't happen, that we need to use the liberal Zionist off-ramp immediately. We need to just like, put Benny Gantz in charge or something. Like, we need to just like single out Benjamin Netanyahu, say he's the bad guy, and then move in the direction.
Yeah, negotiation tactic is kind of crazy. Look, I gave a lot of I definitely was not going to be super aggro on this conversation, because it was like I was trying to be as nice as possible with as much grace as possible.
Move in the direction where like a more manageable, more liberal person, a more moderate person can be left responsible and restrain Israel in some way in order to continue Israel being an unsinkable aircraft carrier in a resource-rich region. And
Hassan, you're a rich commie clown, enemy to free, liberty-loving Americans. You can be mad that your enemy recognizes you, but it doesn't change anything. Playing dumb while holding a weapon, acting like it wasn't a veiled threat. Haha, you are a hypocrite. Brother, you literally said you were going to come to my house and try and kill me. You said it was on site. I think you misunderstood. You just saw, I don't know, you saw the fucking Second Amendment. And it just like frustrated you for a second, I think. That's what it is. That's not me being a hypocrite. I have a right to defend myself, don't you think?
And they didn't even listen to that. Like, the
But
top
also
of
because
the,
it was
the
a-
top of the
because
administration just didn't even listen to that.
Well, because Netanyahu is an obstacle to any kind of peace. I mean, this is we have
The PFP law, you need to see this. Oh my God, that's what you look like? Brother, please have a family, raise your kids. You should not be on fucking Twitch crying in a person's chat like this. Go talk to your fucking kids, man. The fuck are you doing? I never said I was coming to your house. Cope, kid. Why are you acting like you didn't say it's on site for commies like you? Cope, it's coming for you and you helped create this atmosphere. And now you're like, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. There's a reason why your kids are probably embarrassed of you, big dog. It's because, you're doing this shit. Don't do this shit. Also, I am noticing that you did not deny that you want to suck my dick. So that's cool. I don't want it, but I will take it as a compliment.
We have been in moments in the recent past where Palestinians and Israelis were at the table and peace seemed within reach, right? And that seems very far away right now. We were, and that seems very far away right now. But to me, that still seems closer than a single state. And to me, there's that sort of a future of heading towards that is a future of a lot more chaos and violence and terror and horror. And so I come back to my view remains that the future, that the only hope is some kind of a two-state solution. As far as that seems right now, people want to say otherwise, fine. But
I think they're gonna annex the West Bank. I think that's what I think is gonna happen. But
let's move.
Trump's gonna let it happen.
This is the thing.
And it's not even because Trump is ideologically committed to the Zionist project in the way that Joe Biden was. It's because Miriam Adelson gave him $100 million. That's it.
Trump doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit about anything. He's just these guys gave me money. I'm gonna listen to her, and that's it. And that was really funny because that's what he's talked about in the anti-Semitism conference that he put together. If you recall, he was like, "I've done so much for you Jews. Why won't you vote for me?" That's what he kept saying. He's like, "If I lose, it's because of you Jews."
I know.
And it was insane because in his mind, he thinks that's the only thing that American Jews care about. It's the dual loyalty trope. But you also can't do that trope in a woke way on mainstream media either. When you are, I'm not saying you're doing this. Yeah. I'm just saying you also can't do that in a more woke way when you're talking about Israel in as many liberal outlets do sometimes when they talk about you just want Israel to perish, I think, and you're probably anti-Semitic and that it's just Israel has demographic concerns. It's okay, well America has demographic concerns. America has white demographic concerns. That's a non-starter for me. You know what I mean? I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, there is also a ton of anti-Semitism.
And that was, I think, important point that I wanted to land there as well. Am I being too subtle, or is it coming across? I mean, this is not the best audience to ask because you guys know what my perspective is, but.
Anti-Semitism.
Oh, absolutely.
I know you don't. I know.
Yeah,
I just
100%.
making sure because yes, and
yeah, it's skyrocketing.
And that, but again, we gotta move on from this. But it's just you see it in our politics. You see it in politics around Israel. This kind of vicious circle of people feel under threat, they turn inward, they become less and less empathetic towards their neighbors. That leads them to be more and more isolated. And to me, it's the question is not I'm not even interested in philosophical debates, ideologically. It's how do you break that human cycle? Right. And I think on our side, it starts with just a policy that recognizes that even if that it is in Israel's interest to stop the violence and to stop the killing, and that moving towards something like the annexation of the West Bank or the permanent occupation of Gaza or whatever it may be is ultimately not in Israel's interest. I know that makes me sound like a neo-lib shill, but that is what I think.
No, I understand where you're coming from. I don't disagree with you. I think that's why I was trying to bring it back to American politics. And I don't think it's an accident that in the past 3 decades, every single Western capitalist nation firmly planted within the heart of empire, firmly within the comfortable bosom of American imperialism, has shifted dramatically to the right. And in that process, I think, or leading up to that, there was a lot of austerity, a lot of clawing back of social safety nets, a lot of privatization that took place that some people call the enshittification of the economy or the enshittification of everything. And in that process, I think people got more and more angry. And the only people that benefit from that anger are always going to be far-right figures that can point to people that are defenseless and people that are less powerful than you are. And they were able to successfully use the anger to redirect that towards nationalist sentiment, to redirect that towards racism, homophobia, bigotry of all different sorts. And that's why you're seeing the reform movement grow in the UK with Nigel Farage, who now has a higher approval rating than the very conservative Tory-adjacent Labour leadership in Keir Starmer. That's why you're seeing the AfD grow in momentum in Germany. That's why you're seeing Le Pen's party win or also grow as well. Even if she goes to jail, her movement will not, go away. And in every single instance, you have centrist, moderate to like.
How is Cutie running late, bro? Why does chat know she's running late? It's fucking, the podcast is in an hour. It's in 40 minutes. How is she running late? Is she still streaming? She's still making food. She's cooking for 17 people. God damn, dude.
Like center right.
Tell her to fucking end her goddamn stream right now and start driving.
Neoliberal party leadership constantly trying to maintain the hegemonic status of neoliberalism and losing out to populist far-right messaging every step along the way, because when material conditions worsen, okay, and you might look at the technological improvements and say, what do you mean material conditions are worsening? Like, I can order a Uber Eats and immediately have it at my doorstep, but like overall, the important things like educational attainment, healthcare, public transit. If we're talking about Europe, we don't even have that here in America.
We can talk about it here too.
You know, home ownership. These sorts of things are just getting worse and worse year over year, and it truly ruins people's lives, and it leaves them angry and confused. And right wingers like Donald Trump, or fascists like those in Europe, like Maloney's party in Italy as well, or Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, like these guys use that opportunity to say, you know why you're mad? Because Muslim refugees came in and they ruined your beautiful European culture.
It's the challenge, right? Is that like things aren't getting worse on every metric. They're not. And if you were to look at the last, I don't know, 50 years of American politics, and if you just showed people the economic data, and you say, I want you to find on this chart where the United States elected a fascist dunce, you would not pick 2024. You might pick 2008. You might pick 1992. You might pick after the stagflation of the 70s. There are a bunch of times you might say, well, that must have, if it's someplace here, it must have been then. And so I do think like we have to. I think housing is a big part of it. I think people being furious that life didn't seem to come. Like people are, I think, traumatized by the pandemic in ways we're still kind of. It's hard to see and hard to find in polling, right? I think there's like a deep anger about like, hey, wait, things never got back to normal. I don't feel normal. Costs didn't come back down. Life seems worse in measurable and immeasurable ways. And I do think part of it is like, yes, it's material, but it's also, I think,
spiritual.
It is. There is something. I think that there was a bargain people were making when all the restaurants where they knew the owners closed and they were replaced by fucking Panera Breads and Subways and chains. And when their supermarkets became chains and the Walmarts came in, right? When people like to blame Walmart, but Walmart is both a symptom and a cause, right? I think like there was a bargain people made. And the bargain was, I'm going to give up on like the kind of dignity and community and sense of place and belonging that I used to experience in my town for this cheap stuff.
Yeah,
but
treats.
It better be fucking cheap.
Yeah,
it's
treats.
not. But I think people are very bad at understanding what they want. And people, I do think that there's this collective feeling of like, hey, we traded something away to these corporations. And some of it we did unwillingly, some of it we did willingly, but we're not happy with the outcome. And I do think that that's about community.
By the way, don't worry, I bring up the fact that right here, Chad is all chirping saying alienation.
About meaning.
Yeah, what you're describing. You're describing alienation, but
I am. But that is a big
but
part
in
of
the
it.
Marxian sense, not like alienation in the normal understanding of it. But like, yes, you're right. Americans feel isolated. Everyone feels isolated. Everyone feels alienated. They feel alienated from their labor, and besides that, there is no sense of identity. And I talk about this quite frequently. Actually, our consumption is the only marker for identity.
Yeah.
Even guns is a very important political identity for a lot of Americans. That's consumption. That's no different than an expensive Gucci bag. Okay, it's actually more expensive in many instances, and the culture that surrounds it is still ultimately at the point of consumption. And when there is a hurdle in front of that, whether it's cost or because you just simply can't go and buy it at the store or whatever during COVID and the lockdowns, everything falls apart because we're a very fragile nation that is built on this idea that like as long as I get shit for cheap, I'm fine. I don't really care. As long as the cost of eggs will go down. 20 cents or $1, I don't care if 20 million migrants get deported, is the calculation that some people made. And many people said it's not going to happen anyway. Now, there's the other side of the story.
But
that's why
I want to hear the other side. But I just want to just
the other side is what I was trying to say is this is what Kamala Harris did wrong in my opinion. She could have gone up there and said, I am going to arrest the Walton family. And if she was able to successfully say, I'm going to arrest the Walton family and they're going to stand trial, okay, in a military tribunal,
sure.
And that is going to make egg prices $5 cheaper. Eggs are going to be 10 cents again. Americans would have voted for that. That's my point.
So
you don't have to go that crazy, obviously.
No, I know. Well, I guess it's just like this to me. Like these are the twin problems of dealing with a fascist threat. One is keeping a big, fractious, progressive, small L liberal movement together. The other is how you defend the value of institutions that don't do that. And like I know you're being
I'm being hyperbolic. I'm exaggerating.
I know you are. I know you are. I know you are.
I think that for far too long, deregulation and unconditionally supporting corporations, and even having what you just described as like the formative opinion on antitrust. Like, as long as the consumer is happy, as long as the prices are low, we don't care if you monopolize.
But that's the right's view. I mean, we like Democrats are now fighting. Like, no, but some of this is like we're fighting back on that stuff.
No, but so that was the right's view, but that was kind of uniparty for a very long time. At least since the 90s.
I think but this is I think. Conservatives had an ideological view of this.
Yeah.
The Bork view of this. They came in and they said antitrust doesn't mean what it says in the law. It doesn't mean what it says in people's experience of what a monopoly does. It's this one specific definition, which makes it really hard to stop mergers. Yeah. And Democrats said, wait, hold on. Like, kind of, Democrats just didn't have a strong view on this. It just wasn't a motivating. It wasn't.
I know, but why didn't they?
Well, I think I think there wasn't. I think the intellectual academic left had to catch up to the damage this was doing. I think Democrats just didn't focus on it, didn't care about it. I also think there is money from donors. Of course. I'm not. I know you don't need to rhetorically cue me up. I know. But that, like, I think sometimes it is. I think it is not people saying, "Oh, I wish we would go after these giant monopolies more, but I got this donation, so no, now I'm not." But it's a culture, a kind of pro-business culture, right? Yeah. That like kind of pervaded Democrats since the '90s. That made conversations about this kind of thing harder to have, which is different now because Lena Khan is now the chair of the FTC, right? Elizabeth Warren created this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Like, there has been a shift, but it is both a not enough and not a shift in people's actual understanding of what the Democratic Party is for.
There's no immediate gratification that comes from that.
I know.
And the immediate gratification that is supposed to happen could happen potentially with wide sweeping legislative agenda changes overall, or like clearly communicating a pathway towards like a more just outcome for healthcare, for example. Like, that's not something that we're invested in. Like, things that touch people's lives immediately is going to yield very positive benefits. I will say this. I think as far as like Lena Khan or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, these are fantastic things that happened under the the watchful eye of the Biden regime.
Well, Barack Obama
and Barack Obama as well. The problem here, however, is that, once again, I think out of genuine fear, maybe, that they would disrupt or upset the Tony West coalition of the Democratic Party. All of these like major donors that donate to the Democratic Party, they didn't do a good job even explaining what they were doing. And I'll tell you why. Just real quick, I just want to give you an example of the IRS, right? Joe Biden funded the IRS. Every dollar that goes to the IRS, I think, is like what, $7 extra or 30, up to 35, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact numbers, but like every dollar that you spend on the IRS, you get 35 in return in America's coffers, right? Mm-hmm. That's massive. That's fantastic. Republicans hate that.
Yeah.
They hate the IRS. And many Americans also hate the IRS as well. They hate paying taxes, partially because they don't see anything in return for it. And even though the IRS getting more funds actually retrieved a lot of tax dodgers that were refusing to pay taxes, and on top of that, their investigations concluded that I think Coca-Cola had evaded taxes to the tune of $16 billion. Right, one company. Mm-hmm. I never heard that from the Biden administration. They never went out and said, this is why we funded the IRS.
Yeah.
Not because we want to come after you and your trailer, okay, in the trailer park with our armed agents or whatever. Republicans, on the other hand, were like, 85,000 armed agents are coming to your house.
Yeah.
They're going to kill you. They're going to take away your children, and they're going to take your guns, and they're going to take your trailer park.
I think we paid for not having an effective communicator in the president. Like, I think we paid dearly for
it's
that.
not just the president.
I know it's not just the. I know it's both.
Pete Buttigieg is attack dog. Sick him on every television show.
I do think part of the challenge is a lot of people are talking about what these agents would actually do. It just doesn't get covered, doesn't get attention, just doesn't matter. People don't cover this kind of stuff. That's part of it. I'm not saying there aren't Democrats. I agree with you. Like, Democrats need to have a kind of combative. Like, if that's anything we take away from Donald Trump becoming president, is that, like, clearly we need somebody.
People want a fighter.
They want a fighter. They want a fighter. And like.
And you can't fight for opportunity economy and $50,000 in tax credits for startups. That is not something to fight for. You need to be a fighter, and you need to fight for things that are universally good and that people want: healthcare, fixing the housing market, things like that.
Well, she did do that. Yeah, I agree with you.
But again, even her communication on that is like, so much of the Democratic Party is now officially captured by what we would look back in the past as like unimaginably right-wing economic policies, like tax cuts. And tax cuts and a public-private partnership. When I hear those words, I'm like, I'm not regime pilled.
Yeah,
I want to be regime pilled. I want to champion the social democratic regime. I want to make the Democratic Party look like. I want to make the Democratic Party make Olof Palme look like a fucking revisionist right-wing reactionary. Okay. That's what I want. I want trains.
I want trains.
I want better public transit.
Better transit.
I want
more. I want
socialized housing. Like
Okay.
but you're stopping.
I don't know,
there.
but like, what do you mean? We can't get into it. We can't
But
we got
yeah,
out of time.
I mean,
We've
but,
gone
but
so
what
long.
I'm saying is like we need
I am for building millions upon millions of houses everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm for.
Yeah, but no public-private partnership. Build it with federal, publicly funded employees, and build it as a mechanism to claw back the insane housing market prices, to lower them by force.
Okay,
that's what I think.
All right.
I think if you said that, a lot of Americans would be like, I like that idea.
I think if a Democratic politician got up there and said, we are gonna employ millions of Americans, we're gonna have a national jobs program to employ millions of Americans building millions of houses, I think that'd be very popular. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You regime pilled as well.
I am regime pilled. Now, I did go on your feed yesterday to see what you've been up to.
Oh my God.
And
Here
can we just put this up?
I think I know what you're gonna post.
I was looking for what your reaction was to the Harris campaign podcast, and I just found this, and I just thought, is this what the Joe Rogan of the left would post?
I think Joe Rogan posts sexy
Donald
pics of
Trump. Donald Trump wins, and you're like, I think I know what I need to do. I need to post whole.
Yeah.
You getting good reactions to this? Is this getting what you need?
Well, I wanted to show my progress. It's been a while. That's like from 2021 till now, and I mean, I do talk about my fitness journey quite a bit.
You do Pilates?
What?
You do Pilates?
No, I train. I weight train, and then I play basketball.
What are you doing for cardio? Nothing?
Basketball.
Basketball?
Yeah, I play basketball 3 times a week, sometimes 4. And that's been very good. I also track my macro nutrients. I track all my calories.
What does that do for you?
What do you mean? It's that right
You think
there.
that's what it's doing?
Picture on the right. That's
think
how
so?
I got there.
Oh.
Yeah.
I use Manjaro. It's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
I have family members that use it as well, and it's been
cool.
very helpful.
Yeah, I don't have to think about it anymore.
Well, yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. Do you feel like it's stopped your other addictive tendencies as well?
I'm a better driver. Isn't that weird?
Maybe because you're not on your phone or something?
No, I think it's because my I'm not spending so much of my mental energy on diet, and so I'm just a little bit less kind of spent and I don't know, impulsive.
Yeah.
Around other things, and so I don't feel some need to get home 2 minutes faster. It's hard to explain.
Okay.
I don't feel as much of a need to find justice on the roads.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You asked me. No, I 100% get it. You asked me why you track your calories or whatever. I get a lot of comfort from the rigidity of my schedule, my regimen, and I don't even think about it because it's just a habit that I have at this point. And for that reason, it's not even a thing I think about at all. It doesn't weigh on me. But when I was, when I was eating in a very unhealthy way, it did constantly weigh on me. I was like, but it feels so good.
I know,
but also
I know.
it's so bad for me. But then,
I feel you get a little bit hopeless.
Yeah.
It's true in politics too.
For sure. I mean, definitely. But you gotta focus on whatever small victory you can have. And it's the same for fitness. And like I said, going back to the Joe Rogan of the left conversation, this is definitely
Manjaro is Ozempic.
something that I talk to my community about quite a bit. And there's a lot of people in my community that have also gone on their own fitness journey. I've been able to inspire them to do this as well. And I think it's important to be physically healthy.
I do just to close this out because we've gone on too long, but there is something about in terms of meaning and a spiritual I think there's a reason that there's been an appeal of people like the Jordan Petersons of the world and some of the kind of more self-help right-wing types.
Yeah.
And I do think there are a lot of people out there looking for not just sort of answers in politics, but answers about why does I feel unfulfilled, working, not working, whatever it may be. I feel like I'm missing community and the kind of leadership that would come from community.
Bro, this is what she's doing. That's why she's late. God damn. This is crazy.
And I do think that's why sometimes you see I don't know, even on the shows we do, I do feel there's a hunger for something broader than just a political program, but more of a kind of way of grappling with the fact that this version of modern life kind of dares us to ruin our own lives.
Yeah.
I
offer that in my broadcasts every day. I talk about my own personal journeys and I offer advice there. I used to have an advice segment as well. I haven't done it in a while, but like, I'm going to bring it back. And that's why I also like collaborate with other content creators, even if I don't align with them politically, agree with them politically at all. But, there are plenty of people that I know who are my friends, who I think, as long as they're like relatively charitable and good and kind people, even if we don't agree on everything politically, it doesn't matter. I find myself in these bro spaces a lot. I've been on almost every single podcast that Trump has been on.
Yeah.
And many of them are run by my friends, like Impulsive. My buddy Mike Malak is Logan Paul's co-host. Not the biggest fan of Logan Paul, but I love Mike. Mike is a fantastic human being. He has an incredible journey of overcoming addiction, and he wrote about it as well. He had a New York Times bestseller. Bradley Martin with the Nelk Boys. I don't really know the Nelk Boys, but like Bradley Martin I like a lot. He owns Zoo Culture. He's a real meathead. And that's and Andrew Schultz as well. I've been on that podcast too. Like a lot of these podcasts I've been on as well. And like these guys and their audiences are receptive to what I have to say. And I think like optics play a role in that for sure. Like the way I carry myself, the way I am naturally, authentically, I think is a package that young men are not immediately dismissive of. And I'm very aware of that, and I try to use that for good. And I try to use that to like explain to people that like it's not cool to, shit on random people for no reason. They're like, let them live. Like, what the fuck is this to you? It's not gonna fix your life.
Yeah.
You're being a kind of a loser, an entitled little loser, and it's not good. And that does work.
Boss baby energy. Yeah.
It works. And I think the size of my community now and the makeup of it is proof of that reality. Like a couple of years ago, I didn't have the numbers that I have now, and virtually every single person in my audience will tell you that like there is one key issue that I have dramatically changed their opinion on, whether it be American foreign policy, whether it be the way that they viewed trans people and were transphobic, but now they're not, or even racist opinions. So that's what I try to do to the best of my ability in my little corner of the internet.
Hassan Piker, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When we come back, Congressman Seth Moulton.
I hope it was good. I think it was decent. I mean, I definitely toned it down a bit, especially on the Israel's front. And there was a bunch that was cut out, I think, from that conversation too. But not too much. Nothing crazy. I think they just like cut it for one, to save my ass, really, because I said some stuff about Ryan Ruth. Now let's look at the comments. Let's look at the comments. Please don't remind us about Dan's interview. We aren't mad at you. We're mad at overpaid consultants who ever seem to do losing thing. Such a contrast to that utter pablum from the other day. Right from the jump, they're more hostile to Hassan than they were to the people who blew this. I don't think they were that hostile. The Democratic Party needs serious reform. It's bloated without a touch consultants and talking heads trying to justify their jobs, leading losing campaigns and not listening to the working class. He was right before. He's right now. The Dems need to grow a spine and not be doormats. This guy's good at articulating his ideas and desires for people in America and around the world. People will call him idealistic, but not only is that what we need, he backs it up with bountiful evidence. Gotta admit, this guy knocked it out of the park about the way I feel about the party and the direction it's gone since 2009. Why does he understand me better than the people who are paid millions of dollars to do? Damn. Like, that guy is probably not the Hasanabi head just writing a fake. So glad you have Hassan on, because mainstream Dems watch and listen to you. Must understand the obvious truths Hassan articulates. This Hassan guy seems to really know what he's talking about. Glad to see someone accurately diagnose the Democratic Party's issues. Where has the party of FDR gone? That's crazy. That's good. Who is this guy and can he run in 2028? Seriously, he's brilliant. I totally agree with this Joe Manchin blaming. And if I'd known all that stuff, I would have made it public. Thank you for this. Best I felt in 3 weeks, says Arkansas vote blue. These are like liberal moms, dude. God damn. You got 2 Zim packs on the table. Yo, can you get the door? I don't know. It's probably my mom. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Gabe. Yeah, go show some love to the interview. Thanks for having me on. Comment. Boom. That's crazy that this is like popping off. Dude, the Pod Johns, the audience loves it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they love it.
Damn. I watched the whole thing.
You did not watch the whole thing. You're such a liar. Why are you
I was
lying?
listening to the whole thing.
Why do
in
you
the living
lie
room.
all the time, dude?
I was listening to the whole thing in the other room.
You're really doing a disservice to
I
the
was just
gays, bro.
secretly ordering-
You're doing anti-gay propaganda.
Secretly ordering on the BDS list and delivering so much BDS food to them. I don't even know what BDS stands for.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Oh, okay. Just sitting secretly in a corner, mischievously ordering BDS food.
Everyone is praising the same leftist garbage. Please send him to run for office. Another win. I like that the Republican is